New allegations shake the North Carolina governor's race as Republicans put pressure on GOP nominee Mark Robinson. We'll examine what this could mean for the rest of Campaign 24. This is State Lines.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting PBS-NC.
Welcome to State Lines. I'm Kelly McCullen. Joining me today, Don Vaughan of the News and Observer, public relations consultant Pat Ryan, Mitch Kokai of the John Locke Foundation, and Cardinal Pine editor-in-chief Billy Ball. Hello, everyone. What a week. And you know what the top story is.
Something happened?
Something happened because Dawn and others, the Carolina Journal, WRAL and CNN jumped all over a story beginning Thursday of Republican gubernatorial nominee Mark Robinson's alleged written comments on an internet website several years ago. CNN has released some of those comments attributed to Mr. Robinson, where he wrote and called himself a black Nazi, expressed a like of transgender pornography, and CNN reports it has verified Robinson's identity by cross-referencing some terms used online as well as an online name across multiple online platforms. Mark Robinson released a 1:20 long speech on X Thursday afternoon. Here are his comments in their entirety.
Hey guys, Lieutenant Governor Robinson and your Republican nominee for governor as well, of course. Well guys, the news media is at it again. My opponent is at it again. You all have seen the half-truths and outright lies of Josh Stein on these ads over and over again. And now a story leaked by him to CNN is appearing now. Let me reassure you, the things that you will see in that story, those are not the words of Mark Robinson. You know my words, you know my character, and you know that I have been completely transparent in this race and before. Folks, this race right now, our opponents are desperate to shift the focus here from the substantive issues and focus on what you are concerned with to salacious tabloid trash. We cannot allow that to happen. And folks, we've seen this type of stuff in the past as well. Clarence Thomas famously once said he was the victim of a high-tech lynching. Well, it looks like Mark Robinson is too, by a man who refuses to stand on stage and debate me about the real issues that face you. Instead, they want to focus on salacious tabloid lies. We're not going to let them do that. We are staying in this race. We are in it to win it. And we know that with your help, we will. God bless you. And we will see you where? On the campaign trail.
All right, starting with you, Mitch. Sure, we have seen this before, to Lieutenant Governor Robinson's point. This is a September surprise in October, or October surprise in September, I should say. What do you make of this? And Carolina Journal was the first that I saw that came out with this story on the record in writing, as opposed to rumors that were being heard. Let's start somewhere. Dive in with your team's thinking.
Well, this story had been bubbling for a while. I think some people say they'd started to hear about this last week. I know that media outlets by the beginning of the week were already working on this. And really, Wednesday into Thursday morning, you were hearing a lot more rumblings about, oh, there's going to be a big story. It's going to come out on a national news network. It's really going to paint Mark Robinson in a worse light than he already has been painted by some folks because of the activity. And if you talked to people about what was the nature of this story, you heard a lot of salacious details and a lot of things that would really make you say, really? This is part of the story. For the Carolina Journal news team, the thought was, okay, beyond the story that CNN apparently has and is going to be breaking at some point Thursday, there's this other story about some people within Donald Trump's campaign, Mark Robinson's own staff, and some other top Republicans who are saying, look, this is the last day that you could actually drop out, withdraw as a candidate. You should do it for the good of the Republican Party, for the good of the state. Step down, step away from this race. As we know, and as you saw in that commentary, Mark Robinson's not doing that. He's going to remain on the ballot. He's going to remain the Republican nominee. But the reason that Carolina Journal moved forward with that story was beyond the actual accusations that he has denied, but that CNN has documented pretty well. There was the additional story of what are Republicans saying and doing about it?
As a journalist with that background, are you buying Robinson's explanation that it could be AI, that it was fake? What would you, if you're a reporter watching this and reacting, it's really what you should know, not what you should think, but it is an interesting rebuttal to what we saw on CNN Thursday night. It's fake somehow, according to him, but they seem to have cross-referenced a lot of different names and terms.
This isn't a funny story at all, but I think a lot of people who are of a certain age heard his comments and their first thought was that old song by Shaggy, "It Wasn't Me," that you have all of this proof that something is done and he just says it's not me. And you know, he's sticking with that. I think that's also part of what he has been saying throughout the campaign when there have been negative attacks on him, that, look, these are half-truths or lies or taken out of context. You know what I stand for. You know that I'm going to stand for North Carolinians. He in that discussion, he talked about how Stein won't debate him when we know that Robinson wouldn't debate any of his Republican opponents in the primary, which makes that kind of interesting. So to me, it's part and parcel of how Mark Robinson has operated as a candidate. Ever since he first got on the scene, he's been a person who's been outside of the establishment, sort of knocking on that door and saying we're going to do things differently, and standing up to the accusations as well documented as they appear to be. And I don't have access to what CNN has, so I can't tell you how true it is. It seems true from what they have reported. But standing up to that is part and parcel of how Mark Robinson operates.
Billy, not to nationalize this discussion, very interesting strategy. Whoever, Stein campaign, leaks this to CNN to get it. They choose traditional media over new media when new media and digital media is on the rise. What do you make of the choice to go old school with this tactic to expose or to try to shed new light on Mark Robinson?
I think whoever got this story to CNN, assuming CNN didn't just happen to be going through old pornography websites, whoever got this story to CNN wanted a huge, huge impact, a national audience, and they wanted those eyes on the fact that Trump is connected with Robinson, and this is a very close race. I think that was part of the math when they made that decision. I will say that before I wrote commentaries, I was an investigative reporter for years, and one of the things that I noticed about the CNN story, however, regardless of who brought it to them, they came correct. They crossed their T's and they dotted their I's, and it's going to be good luck if you're going to look at this story and make the case that this is all fake and people are after me. It's going to be an uphill battle for him, but I haven't seen a scandal like this in North Carolina for some time.
Dawn, you have your own take, you have your own leads in this story. Take us through your process over the last few days to weeks from inside the legislature, someone who focuses on, from the Capitol Bureau.
Well, I talked to somebody last week when, there have been rumblings that more and more is coming out about Robinson, a variety of things, not just this. And somebody said to me, where we've reached the point that there isn't any sort of surprise headline that but this was, I mean, it still takes you, the national news described it as a bombshell. It really was, because I think what CNN presented was so thoroughly cross-checked information. Of course, I haven't seen it, like you were saying, it appears to be. Of course, Robinson is, denying everything without explaining exactly what he didn't say. That's never been my email address. He didn't say, all of the other, he didn't give any sort of details. And I think he used the phrase in the video he put out, minutia. And he also went on CNN and, did the, remote, did the interview where they presented the evidence. And he said pretty much the same thing, I feel like, than in the video that he put out to everybody. And they showed that these are similar phrases that he's used with other things. But I think the difference this time is that a lot of it, and I've made, made an effort to show his controversial, some people need killing comment. I watched that entire speech. I included the full quote. He's talking about World War II, but then he kind of segues to the police and people doing things. And you can include all of that context around a lot of what he said. But this is different. If this is what he did, it's beyond the pale. The type of comments, and that's obviously why whoever found this information wanted it out there in entirety. Where the more you read, the more you gasp. As far as what was typed, if it was by him or someone trying to be him. And yeah, the timing would have given Republicans an out if he wanted to resign, to put up somebody else if they had somebody ready, but that's not something he wants to do.
In the general sense, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I want to ask you a general question. I've never been an investigative reporter. When opposition research is out there, and let's just say Team Stein's behind some of this, so you have to have a friendly, you have to have somebody doing this. How does that work when you're a journalist in the scheme of things? Is opposition research really in depth? Does it just set it up for you to write it if you choose to take the bait? Or does it still require lots of work? That's what most folks don't know. And I can say from viewers writing me, they appreciate when reporters will let them peek under the hood just a bit. So I ask you about opposition research and its role in these kinds of issues.
So people will give things, and I guess some people might do it if they think like somebody is friendly to them, or they're just putting it out and see. I think the strategy is probably more that they want this information out somehow, and they want someone to really scrutinize it or to not, and get it out there and put it with whatever platform. So people will share Oppo, and then it's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think this is enough. And then they'll go, it's called they shop it around to other people when things come out, and different news organizations, have different standards of is this enough for a story? Is this part of a story? And then you do your work yourself. You don't just take someone's word for it, and then you go through all of that, a very long process to find out, is this what they're saying true? Can I prove this myself independently? Is that worth it? So that's kind of, that's where things are.
Yeah, I think you have sort of both sides of the equation between the two of us here, right? I'm the PR guy, Dawn's the reporter, and so in a general context, somebody like me would find information that is advantageous to, my candidate or disadvantageous to the other candidate, and say, hey, Dawn, I think that this information is pretty interesting, would make a pretty good story. Here's what I have. What do you think? And Dawn might say, yeah, I think that would be a pretty good story. Let me research and check it out myself and verify things, and then ideally run it. Or she might say, no, it's really it's kind of boring. It's kind of dumb, Oppo. I don't really think that makes for a very good story. And like anything, the quality of the content can vary based on the candidate and based on the type of research and all that sort of thing. But that's sort of the long and short of it. In my opinion, this was a perfectly executed hit job, which is, I don't say hit job in the context of the story is, maybe not true. I just say it was a very well done hit on Mark Robinson. It was timed perfectly such that he had only a matter of hours to make a decision about whether to stay or leave the race. There was days and days of rumor mongering around the political classes in Raleigh, which adds even more impact to the story. And it was buttoned up. CNN spent maybe a third of their story talking about how they verified things and why they're pretty sure these comments can be attributed to Mark Robinson. It was a very well done.
It's important to note that as a reporter, when anybody tells you anything, you have to think, what's their motivation? Are they doing this? We're talking about opposition research, so the motivation might be clear. It's not necessarily from the different party. Sometimes it's within the same party. But you always have to think with anything, with any public relations pitch, with anyone saying, I heard this or this happened to me, and what's their motivation for sharing that with you? And we're always, it's the nature of the job. You're skeptical all the time, of everything. And so that goes into this too. But it seems like with whatever CNN was provided or somehow they got, tipped off or all of it, they still had to be incredibly skeptical because you don't want to be wrong,
What happens if a journalist makes a mistake on a story like this and they get so-called played by a campaign? What if it was AI or a smear or just completely fabricated and you fell for it? Would you be like Dan Rather and say yes?
It could be a career ender. Yeah, sure.
You won't be in the business very long if that's what you do.
Yeah, and no one's gonna take that kind of risk if you're, news organization.
Yeah, which is why CNN spent so much time going through. Here's this connection and that connection, and this email address is the same as this. They spent a copious amount of time going through very almost boring details about why they're very confident that their story is accurate.
And Pat mentioned
for that reason.
And Pat mentioned the timing, and I don't know how far in advance this was scheduled, but another piece of that timing was the Democratic candidate in this same race, Attorney General Josh Stein, had a news conference the same day where he had a bunch of Republicans who are now Republicans for Stein.
I mean, Billy, really, I mean, the timing on some of this is very coincidental.
I mean, it's certainly, it's well played politically, but I think more important than the partisan stuff is thinking about what real people actually care about when they're deciding who is going to lead the state of North Carolina. And I do hope that people, instead of just reading about the spin and all the talk about this story, actually go and read it, because Robinson has portrayed himself as a candidate as this family man, this very moral Christian figure, but there are things in there that are backed up and credible that we can't say on this television show or in many mainstream media outlets, because they're menacing, they're frightening, and talking about peeping on people in the locker room. Like, these are things that expose some huge issues with anybody, regardless of your party. And so I'd encourage people to go read this.
Would you encourage adults to do that? I saw a tweet where people, be careful about who you hurt by showing and distributing this material raw, if you will, but it is words, and if true, they are truthful words. Should CNN be more overt about that? Dial back the trigger? Don't scare people off from reading this. Is that what you're saying?
I'm a believer in truth first, and I think if people are making choices as voters in this state about who's going to lead us in a time of emergency and the most important decisions, you should probably know if there's a difference between the person that the candidate is portraying them as and the person who they appear to be behind closed doors.
There's also something to note about being a security risk. I mean, this is more of like on the national scale, but vetting candidates, vetting someone in power where somebody can blackmail you, like you need to vet your own people, because then you put everyone's secure, like literal, like the security of the state, of the country at risk if there's something that somebody can use against you, and that's very serious.
Pat, as a PR professional, set aside the name Mark Robinson, and this is what happens. You get this dropped in your lap for a candidate and you're trying to run PR. What do you do? What would you advise John or Jane Doe to say or do a video out there?
In defense of this, you mean, or
let's put a hypothetical. Someone comes in and your candidate John Doe has been caught with online forum postings and all this. Pat, whether you like it or not, you can either quit or you can help or you can say get out. What would you do in a business term, from a business perspective?
Yeah, so I think there are two things there. One is the actual response. Two is the personal question of whether I want to continue being affiliated with this type of thing. I think people who quit, usually you should ride it out. You know, nobody's going to blame the PR person. Nobody's going to blame the staffer who, of course, didn't know anything about this. If you sign up for a team, you should finish the game, in my opinion. But on the second question of how to approach something like this, I think the general sort of standing advice is, at least in my opinion, if there is something that's derogatory that's coming out about you, then 99 times out of 100, it's best to just own it, get more details out in a single story, tell the entire story. It's going to be bad, but you just get it all out in one story. You don't allow things to fester and new information to come out over the course of days and weeks, and you just move on with your life. Except when that derogatory information is existential, in that you're going to go to jail, or you're certainly going to lose your campaign, or you're going to be impeached, or there's no surviving this story. In that sense, there's really nothing else that you can do other than deny it.
What do you make of the PR response? Mark Robinson went directly to a camera. He looked directly into that camera, which is looking directly at us as we watch it. What do you make of that, tactically?
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything more that you can do. You get your side of the story out there and hope that your defense can stand side by side with the contents and the rationale for why the other side says this is true. I think right now a reasonable person could look at the defense and the rationale for why it's true, and most people would probably come to a particular conclusion on that.
All right, Dawn?
He could bring the evidence out of why this isn't, and you don't see a lot of people hold themselves accountable in politics, I've noticed, even when it's a very minor thing. You know, I've asked people, what do you disagree with someone on? What do you regret? And it's okay to say, I regret this, to apologize. If you're, you know, a religious person, to ask for forgiveness, you can do that. And, you know, if you're writing something out instead of acting like you've never done anything wrong in any case. And I've seen that on a lot of different levels, this reluctance to just to admit things, to say you've made a mistake, to say you're sorry. It's okay to say you're sorry.
Social media would punish you regardless, I would think. I mean, I get it for journalism.
Well, corrections, we run them on the front page. We own it. We have to fill out a form where we explain to our bosses why you made this mistake. And you have to. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of people have to live their lives. Maybe more people should.
Mitch, this is a case where Republicans have turned on a Republican candidate. A good political issue would be Democrats all piling on Republicans, creating the firewall, and vice versa. In this case, Republicans are now stepping out and going and weighing in on this issue. How does that change the game? And now that the Trump campaign's obviously let it be known he's not welcome at their events in North Carolina right now, if ever again, how does that change the dynamic of this particular issue?
Well, I think the thing that Republicans have been looking at, and some of the polling has suggested it, is that Mark Robinson and his decline in the polls and the rise of Josh Stein is having an impact on other parts of the ballot. And of course, from the party's perspective, their main interest is winning. That's what the parties do. They care about winning elections. That's their role. And so I think Republicans are worried that Robinson potentially hurts Trump, although you think Trump has his own brand and is probably immune to anything from Robinson. But other people up and down the ballot, especially in the statewide races, we've seen in our own Carolina Journal polling that Democrats have gained 4 or 5 points in the last month, while Republicans have creeped up maybe 1 point, which means that a lot of these races that had been led by Republicans are now led by Democrats. And I think Republicans are trying to now focus on how do we limit the damage to Mark Robinson himself and allow everyone else to do as well as they can.
Yeah, Mitch is exactly right. The point of a campaign and the point of a party is to win an election. So from here on out, you're going to see all the Democrats say, oh, well, you know, Senate candidate so-and-so is really just Mark Robinson in disguise, or, you know, Council of State candidate so-and-so is super close to Mark Robinson because they want to create this brand association that they hope brings down other Republicans. The Republicans will be doing the opposite, right? Trying to distance themselves, perhaps. This is just basic blocking and tackling of politics.
And on that front, there is a competitive Wake County State Senate district where we've already seen ads tying the Republican candidate to Robinson, and that candidate came out with a statement yesterday saying, Robinson, suspend your campaign.
Yeah, Scott Lasseter. Yeah.
It should be said, however, that the scandals with Robinson, and usually he was battling his own words for most of his campaign. That was what he was fighting. The scandals with Robinson have been sort of a slow drip for years now, and there have been opportunities along the way during the primaries for the party, the Republican Party, to distance themselves from Robinson. They had a candidate in Dale Folwell who had respect on both sides, and you know, it's hard to say, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but probably would be doing better in this campaign right now than Robinson.
I talked to the state, Republican state treasurer, Dale Folwell, longtime, elected official yesterday, lost to Robinson in the primary, and what Folwell said to me is, I've been saying this about Robinson for a couple of years, that he said the taxpayers are being fleeced by him and the donors are. But Folwell also noted that, a lot of people have already made a bunch of money off of Robinson.
Dale Folwell also said on CNN, this is up to Donald Trump and Michael Watley. They anointed Mark Robinson, so they own it. And if there's any pressure to make Mr. Robinson drop out, they should do it. Is it fair for a former candidate to go on national TV and lay that responsibility at the very top of the GOP ticket?
I think I have a broad definition of fair. I think Treasurer Folwell, I think he has a reasonable point. Others can disagree and nitpick with it, but that's a reasonable case for someone to make, especially someone who lost in a primary and was trying to win. On the question of who sort of leads on this, I think if there's going to be an effort to have Mark Robinson drop out of the race, I think most sort of political observers would say that effort would need to come from the very top of the ticket.
Yeah. Billy, we only have 2 minutes left in this. We have been told, just anecdotally and subjectively opinion, some lawmakers have been running kind of against Mark Robinson because they thought there may be some weaknesses in the campaign, so therefore help us maintain our supermajority. Do you expect that to become more public, or will Republicans still stay muted in terms of how they handle Mark Robinson out there on the trail, particularly as he goes through their respective counties? A lot of them are red.
I think Pat's absolutely right that they're going to be trying to distance themselves as much as possible. But I think also when you're running in a local legislative race, you're thinking about the issues that are near and dear to the voters in your town, which is more like things about affordability, about health care, the types of things that your constituents are coming to you with. They're not always coming to you with a political sex scandal to talk about. So for them, I think the strategy for them is going to be to focus on those types of issues instead of this scandal at the top of the ticket. But yeah, I mean, we've seen candidates already who are trying to remove Robinson from their Twitter profile or their Instagram profile, and it's not going to work. The internet feels like forever. So,
last 30 seconds, Mitch. Does this story go away? Has the bomb been dropped, and we'll just go to something else next week? 30 seconds.
I don't think so. I think it has at least a little bit of a life, and I would not be surprised if there weren't other things that may still be coming out. The people who have been responsible for getting the information out about Mark Robinson have already done a good job. My guess is as we get closer and closer to the days of voting, there may be some other shoes to drop.
Panel, thank you very much. One topic show, very rare for State Lines, but I appreciate your patience in this conversation. Email your thoughts and opinions to us about this, statelines@pbsnc.org. We'll check out every email. Thanks for watching. I'm Kelly McCullen. We'll see you next time.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting PBS NC.